bring in our guest for the afternoon, man. We've got the
Sponsored
one
by
and
Venture,
only
fam. It was sponsored by
sponsored
Venture.
by Venture. That's a good one. We got the one and only Robert Mays here, man, of the Athletic Football Show. One of the best follows on football Twitter. You can follow him at Robert Mays on Twitter, or X is how they call it now. But Robert, how you feeling, man? Great to have you back on.
Good to be here. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you back, bro. Didn't get a chance to run into you at Super Bowl week. There's a lot of stuff going on. I feel like Radio Row was my first time being in Radio Row, and it was a lot to deal with, to say the least.
It gets crazier every year, man. You walk in there and it just feels like it's like a Disney World of like football media. I mean, the bounty set up this year was just completely out of control. They have like their own like Disney-esque ride. It feels like. I mean, it's just
they had the
every single
wings
year
there passing out. Yeah, the bounty. It was like the line to get the wings. Like you could tell they actually cooked the wings because you can stand in there for about 30 minutes to actually get the food, man. But let's just get right into it, man. We are a week away from the legal tampering period of NFL free agency. A lot of rumors going on with the Bears. Been a lot of smoke today around Khalil Mack. That's been reported by different outlets. We heard that. Obviously, Trey Smith is going to be tagged. Hasn't officially been tagged yet. We don't know what the Chiefs are going to do there, but I just wanted your opinion on how you think the Bears and Ryan Poles should approach this free agency compared to how they've done it the first 3 years in Ryan Poles' term as general manager.
It's a great question because guys keep flying off the board. You know, I feel like Trey Smith was a reasonable marriage for them with the cap space that they have and the needs that they have. And now you have the top draft or the top guard option off the board. Typically, guard is an interior offensive line is a pretty good spot to find free agents. If you look at the history, whether that's availability and the hit rate. But this year, there just aren't that many guards and centers available. So how they negotiate that is going to be interesting. What they do on the defensive line, it feels like they have a ton of money to spend and there aren't a ton of options. So I expect them to be pretty aggressive because I think that there's some urgency, especially on Ryan Poles' side of things, to make sure he gets this stuff in order and what is a huge season for him. But I'm curious how they go about it because there are not as many options available as you'd like when you have this much money to spend.
Yeah, and I think too also with that, like I think the bad thing about not even I guess not the bad thing, but the thing that's kind of crazy is you don't want to like go too crazy and try to make up for draft mistakes you made in the past and spend all the money. I think we've seen the Bears do that before, but at the same time, you don't want to be passive, which I kind of feel like the Bears have done in the Brian Poles tenure a little bit. To you, what is a more like out of the two lines, what is more important to spend free agent dollars on? Would it be the O-line or the D-line?
I would say O-line for this reason. I think that having certainty and a high floor on the offensive line is a necessity. Like you just have to make sure you have no weak links up front. On defense, you want stars. You want to make sure you're hunting for upside on the defensive line. So you need stopgap starters at guard. Like if they sign Will Fries to an $11 million a year deal to play right guard for them, that's acceptable. Like you just want to make sure up front on offense, you have 5 guys you feel good about. On defense, you're hunting for superstars. And so I feel like you're trying to, if you want to go in the draft that way because you want younger guys with higher upside, that's typically how I think about it. And we'll see whether or not their needs and the available players in both of those areas line up with approaching it that way.
Now, with the name that kind of, I won't say came out of nowhere. I feel like a lot of fans were talking about it, but I kind of feel like it was more of a, we love this player more than the actual realistic thing. We starting to hear about Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack had a career year 2 years ago, 17 sacks, 2023. Had only 6 last year, but still a solid contributor to that Chargers defensive line. Now, we all know, I think the big fish probably Sweat for Philadelphia, but what would you think about a possible reunion with Khalil Mack now that we hear that he's actually interested?
The only reason I would be hesitant about that is you have to think about what your timeline looks like as a team. Are you going to be ready to compete in even 2026? If you feel like that's the answer and you think Khalil Mack has 2 really good years left, I can understand that, but he's getting a little bit older. That's my only concern, is that by the time you're really ready to push and try to compete for the division, even more than that, is Khalil Mack still going to be part of the plan? So I think that's why going a little bit younger at that spot makes a little bit more sense. But Khalil Mack is still a really, really good player. And if you look at this free agent class, there are no perfect guys. I mean, Josh Sweat's going to be on a 3rd contract. There's a lot of guys that several different positions. They're either coming off of injuries, third or fourth contracts. So the fact that there are no guys that are outside of maybe like a Milton Williams or Osia Odigwuzua that you think is a 26, 27-year-old guy that you can sign in his prime, there are a lot of imperfect players available in free agency this year.
Yeah, and with the offensive line side of thing, I think we all I said on this show for weeks, I believe Trey Smith hits the the market when I see it. Like I just believe that really good offensive linemen just don't hit the market like that. And especially the way the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, I just kind of felt like he was coming back. Now they could tag him, try to trade him. That could happen. They did the same thing with Snead last year. Let's just say they do decide to actually give him a long-term deal. How would you rank the available offensive linemen on the free agent market, and which position would you go number one and spend the big dollars at?
There aren't a lot of guys. I mean, you look at guards outside of Trey Smith. Again, Will Fries is probably the next best option. He broke his leg last year. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Even the guys who are worth it, who are these second contract players, a lot of them are coming off of injury. And then you move beyond a guy like Will Fries, Tevin Jenkins might be the best available guard in free agency. Kevin Zeitler is an older player on a one-year deal potentially. Mekhi Becton was a reclamation project who had one decent year in Philadelphia. You've got guys like James Daniels coming off of a torn Achilles. So the guard pool is just thinner than it typically is. Tackle was an interesting spot before this period started because I actually think that there were more left tackle options available in free agency this year than you almost ever see. Ronnie Stanley, Dan Moore, and Alaric Jackson, that's 3 starting caliber left tackles. You never see those guys hit free agency. And then Alaric Jackson gets signed to a long-term extension last week. So now you're down to 2 again, and there's a chance Ronnie Stanley's back in Baltimore, so you got 1 starting left tackle. At center, it's really Drew Dahlman and Ryan Kelly. Who knows if Ryan Kelly wants to even keep playing? And I think Drew Dahlman is a solid player. I think he is a specific player. He is undersized, and I think he fits what Atlanta likes to do. But if you look at Atlanta, their run game and their offense is different than almost anybody else in the NFL right now. They run tons and tons of outside zone, and that fits somebody that's a little bit undersized like Dahlman is. But if you look at what Ben Johnson did in Detroit, they ran every run under the sun. And I'm just not sure that Dahlman is a flexible enough piece for that to be the type of offense you want to drop him into. So it's unfortunate because in a lot of years, if you wanted to rebuild your offensive line through free agency, you'd be able to do it. Stars aren't available, but workable starters are available. And this year, it just, even with all the money the Bears have, I think it's going to be a tall task to find 3 starting caliber players that you feel good about. You're going to be dipping a little bit lower than you want to.
Definitely. So with knowing all of that, how should the Bears approach the draft? With that number 10 pick, is this trade down territory? It could Will Campbell, who I doubt will drop after his combine performance, even though his arms are supposed to be smaller now. No arms supposed to be like this, I guess now. How should the Bears approach this draft?
It's a great question. And when I was looking at it originally, my thought was, all right, you got $67 million in cap space. You can do enough on the interior of the offensive line there where you can just start hunting needs and defensive line in the draft. You have 3 picks in the top 40. If you want to try to find 2 starting caliber players on the defensive line in the second round, maybe you can do that. It's the type of draft to do it. But now as I'm looking at this and I see all the holes on the roster, the trade down thing becomes a little bit more appealing because you don't have that 4th round pick because of the Austin Booker trade. You don't have a 5th round pick because of the Bates trade. And so do you want to pick up maybe 1 mid-round pick somewhere along the way? Because you still need probably another running back, multiple interior offensive linemen, at least 1 interior defensive lineman, and an edge player. And do you have enough picks to do that given the lack of players available in free agency? I still think they probably take somebody at 10 because their needs are going to line up with the types of players who are available. You mentioned Will Campbell. I mean, there's a chance Armand Membu from Mizzou is actually the first offensive lineman drafted. And does that mean Campbell gets to 10? Even if Campbell doesn't get to 10, are you going to be in range for a Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M or James Pierce from Tennessee, which is also in need of yours? So I think that there's probably going to be enough good players at positions of need available at 10 for them to stick. But I also understand the trade down argument because I think that trying to get 1 or 2 more starters in that 2nd and 3rd round range is appealing given the lack of options in free agency this year.
I love James Pierce, but I was reading today. He's probably one of those ain't shit players. Is the best way of putting it. Apparently he has. I think somebody put it as he's the most checkered player in the draft. But I look at his combine and I go, whoa. I would love him on my team. Is the Bears the Bears already passed on somebody with a checkered past?
Right.
Are we at the level right now we could just continue passing on people with checkered past, or do we just need to get athletic people who can play the game?
I think there's probably an argument for the second one, given what Jalen Carter is doing in Philadelphia right now.
Exactly.
I think it's a little bit different in this sense. Jalen Carter actually did have a checkered past, right? Like something very serious happened in Jalen Carter's past. With James Pierce, the way that I understand it, and I'm not a draft expert, this is all stuff that I just hear from other people. And then Dane Brugler, who does a phenomenal job covering the draft for us at The Athletic. I mean, he's in this stuff all day. I think the way that I would bucket it with James Pierce is more personality concerns. Like that's a big bucket, but that's probably how I would describe it. So if you're comfortable with that, and you see what sort of athlete he is, you see what the production looked like, you see what he did at the combine, are you comfortable doing something like that? So I feel like edge, again, just where they're drafting might be a possibility, but let's say you sign a Josh Sweat in free agency. That becomes less of a need. Does that push you to the offensive line? Does it push you to the interior of the defensive line? This is all such a puzzle depending on how the next 2 weeks go. And there's really no way for us to understand where the draft needs are going to be before we see how they're going to spend all that money.
Robert, real quick, speaking of draft needs, I know there's a lot of talk about quarterbacks, and I'm just, for the record, I'm not a Bears fan, so this is more of just like a general.
I'm mad you threw that out like it was like it's not one of y'all.
This is not going to be Bears specific, and obviously every team has glaring needs, especially quite a few teams with quarterback needs. But just going into this draft, who do you think, not just quarterbacks in general, who do you think has the highest potential to make an immediate impact on their new respective team?
If he's healthy, I feel like Abdul Carter is that type of guy. And just the way that people are talking about him. I was talking to a coach last week who was discussing the possibility of him landing on the Browns if Myles Garrett were to stay. And he said, if you have those two guys in the same defensive line, I don't know as an offense how you drop back to pass. Like that's how he was talking about Abdul Carter. So, and obviously Travis Hunter is a special talent. Corner, I think, has fallen off a little bit when we talk about premier positions in the NFL. If you look at the way the corners are paid, where corners are drafted, it's not like it was maybe 10 years ago. I feel like defensive ends, even interior defensive linemen, kind of risen in value more than corners have. But if you have a special corner who can lock down one side of the field for you, we see what Patrick Surtain does for the Broncos, and it does feel like Travis Hunter has a chance to be that sort of guy at that position.
Related note, did you see what Travis Hunter said at the combine about his, the two-way player thing, and if who has it harder, him or Shohei Ohtani? Did you beat that?
No, I didn't see that. What did he say?
Well, he said himself, just because Ohtani is incredibly talented. This is I'm just being very broad here, but he said essentially, what he does, just because it requires more athleticism, it's more difficult. What do you think about that?
I think that's fair. I mean, we don't see two-way players in the NFL for a reason. What Shohei Ohtani does from a skill set perspective is unbelievable, but you pitch once every 5 days. I mean, in theory, you can do it, especially if you're a DH. In the NFL, I mean, what he did in college, the idea that somebody could play 100 snaps a game and play at that high of a level, there's a reason he won the Heisman Trophy as a position player. We never, ever see that. So in terms of the physical demands on somebody playing two ways in the NFL, I think it's probably higher than somebody that's trying to do it in baseball, even if in baseball, the specialization of the skills is what really stands out there.
Absolutely.
Rob, I got one last question for you, then we'll get you out of here. Just give us like your prediction next week. What do you think will be like the first Bears announcement, as far as like last year? Remember, the first one was DeAndre Swift immediately. If you could give me an idea of who you think will probably be the first guy we hear linked to the Bears this time next week.
I wish I had a good idea. I would have said Trey Smith. If you had asked me this 5-6 days ago, Trey Smith would have been my immediate answer. Now I'm just not sure where they go. I feel like if you're just looking at the players available on the board and the biggest needs on the roster, to me, it would be some sort of edge player. You know, whether that is a Josh Sweat or somebody else. I just think that that's the smartest place to spend your money if you have the sort of free agency wiggle room that the Bears have. But I'm open to anything. If they like Will Fries, is it a Will Fries because of how many needs they have along the interior of the offensive line? But now that Trey Smith is off the board, I truly think that you can go any direction depending on whatever your preference is among these players or whatever taste you have. Are you prioritizing offensive line? Are you prioritizing defensive line? Because they have so many needs, I think it's hard to predict now that the most obvious player is no longer available.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm as long as there's somebody in the trenches, it doesn't matter which side to me. That's kind of the first one that I want to see, man. Anything you want to tell the people about what you got coming out? What's gonna be on the latest episode of your pod or any articles you got? Let them know what you got right now.
We did a draft combine recap with our guy Dane Brugler today. It's available in the Athletic Football Show feed, and we'll have 3 more free agency shows over the course of this week. We're going to do a mailbag, just answering some free agency questions, and then we're going to do an offense and defensive preview. And then next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we got live streams every day recapping what happened in free agency, including a very big one on Monday when the tampering period starts and these signings start rolling in. So if you want to come hang out with us on that Monday, it starts at noon Eastern on the Athletic Football Show YouTube channel. And we're just going to be sitting there all day reacting to the signings as they roll in.
Definitely, man. That is Robert Mays. You can follow him at Robert Mays on Twitter. Get in tune with the Athletic Football Show, man. Always good to talk to you, man. Looking forward to having you on here again, bro.
Sounds good. Appreciate the time. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Triple double hat trick, I know the code too. Ice trade, go for trade, yeah we cold too. Getting paper on these player haters, old news. Money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line, so I'm not gonna hold you. Money on the other line.